Studying abroad is supposed to be an exciting and life-changing experience. When I first arrived in Australia, I was full of hope. I believed I had made the right choice, a country known for its top universities, diverse culture, and promising future. But what I didn't realize was that beneath the surface, international students like me face a harsh and unforgiving reality. This is my story, my first-hand experience of how Australia failed me as an international student. One of the worst experiences I had was when I fell seriously ill. It started as a mild fever, but within a day, it got so bad that I could barely move. My head was pounding, my neck was aching, and my body felt like it was on fire. I knew I needed to see a doctor. Immediately, I somehow gathered the strength to get out of bed and found the nearest GP clinic. It was just a few minutes away, and in that moment, I felt relieved. I thought I could finally get the help I needed, but I was wrong. As soon as I walked in, exhausted and barely able to stand, the receptionist asked for my health insurance details. After checking, she told me flatly, "Sorry, we don't accept your healthcare provider. You'll have to go somewhere else." I couldn't believe it. I was right there, in desperate need of medical attention, but they refused to see me simply because my insurance wasn't accepted at that clinic. They told me to go to another GP near my university. The problem? That clinic was almost 2 hours away. At this point, my fever was over 100 degrees. I was sweating, shivering, and barely able to keep my eyes open. But I had no choice. I had to get on public transport and travel across the city just to find a doctor who would actually see me. Every second on that journey felt like torture. The bus ride, the train, the walk, I could barely keep myself upright. But I kept going because I had no other option. By the time I reached the clinic, I was completely drained. I checked in and sat in the waiting area, hoping to be called in soon. I had made it on time, and I thought, at the very least, I would be seen immediately. But then, something happened that made me realize just how unfair the system was. A local Australian citizen walked in after me. He checked in, sat down for barely 5 minutes, and then, just like that, he was called in before me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Here I was, having just traveled 2 hours while feeling like I was on the verge of collapsing, and yet I was forced to wait even longer. No explanation, no consideration, just a silent reminder that as an international student, I wasn't a priority. I ended up waiting another full hour, sitting there in pain, sweating, and struggling to stay awake, before a doctor finally saw me. That moment opened my eyes. I wasn't just a student in Australia. I was a customer, a paying customer who was expected to give thousands of dollars to this country but wasn't given the same care, respect, or urgency as a local. My health, my well-being, and my struggles didn't matter. And I wasn't alone. This is a reality for so many international students who come here expecting fairness but are treated like second-class citizens. This experience was just one of many. From struggling to find a job without being underpaid, to dealing with overpriced rent and endless visa restrictions, I learned the hard way that Australia is not the dream destination it claims to be. The system is set up to take our money but offers little in return. If you're thinking about studying here, I urge you, do your research. Know what you're getting into. And most importantly, ask yourself, do you really want to go through what I went through? If you've been following my channel, you already know that I've talked about the serious job crisis in Australia for international students. In my previous video, I exposed how students are struggling to find fair-paying jobs, facing underpayment, exploitation, and even job scams. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend checking it out. It's an eye-opener, and it might just save you from making a costly mistake. In that video, I broke down exactly how international students are being taken advantage of, from employers paying below minimum wage to fake trial shifts where students work for free. The reality of working in Australia is far from what's advertised. Many students arrive here expecting part-time jobs to be easily available, only to find themselves working long hours for illegal wages, or worse, unable to find a job at all. And let's not forget how strict visa conditions make everything even harder. Unlike in countries like Canada or Germany, where students have better job protections and clearer pathways to permanent residency. Australia's system makes it incredibly difficult to balance work and study without breaking the rules. One mistake, working just a few hours over the limit, could cost you your visa and force you to leave the country. And if you've already seen it, let me know in the comments. Have you or someone you know faced job struggles in Australia? Let's get the conversation going and expose the truth behind the so-called opportunities for international students. Finding a place to live as an international student in Australia is supposed to be simple. You arrive, search for a rental, and move in. At least, that's what I thought. But what I didn't realize was that the rental market here is brutal, especially if you're on a tight budget, don't have a job yet, and, in some cases, if you don't fit the preferred tenant profile. What was supposed to be a simple process turned into one of the most stressful experiences of my life. When I first arrived in Australia, I was lucky enough to have a place to stay. My father's friend let me live in his house for the first few weeks while I searched for my own accommodation. It gave me time to settle in, explore my options, and figure out how things worked here. But as the days passed, I quickly realized that finding a place, one that was affordable, close to my university, and actually livable, was far more difficult than I had expected. I started by looking for rooms near my university. The convenience of living close to campus would have saved me so much time and stress. But when I saw the rent prices, my heart sank. A small, cramped-up room, barely big enough for a single bed and a desk, was going for nearly $1,400 per month, and that didn't even include bills. As a student with no job yet, this was completely out of my budget. I knew I had to look elsewhere. That's when I turned to more affordable rental listings. But I quickly ran into another problem. Many of these places had specific preferences for tenants. They only wanted students of certain backgrounds. Some listings openly stated, Asian students only. I wasn't considered simply because I didn't match their preferred ethnicity. It didn't matter if I was responsible, respectful, or capable of paying rent. I was rejected based on something I had no control over. It was frustrating, disheartening, and frankly, something I never expected to deal with in a country that claims to be multicultural and inclusive. After searching for a month and a half, I finally found a place in Carnegie. It was under $700 per month, and that price included bills. Compared to everything else I had seen, it felt like a win. The room was decent, and I was relieved to finally have a space of my own. But there was a catch. The house owner had extremely high expectations. She wanted her tenants to keep the house spotless at all times. And I don't just mean cleaning up after yourself. I mean deep cleaning the entire house, including areas we didn't even use, every single week. Balancing my tuition, job search, and university studies was already overwhelming, and now I had the added stress of constant cleaning duties. It felt like I was paying rent just to work as an unpaid cleaner for the landlord. No matter how exhausted I was from assignments and long study sessions, I was expected to scrub floors, wipe down every surface, and maintain a level of cleanliness that was unrealistic for a house shared by multiple tenants. But I didn't have a choice. I needed a place to live. So I stayed there for 9 months, constantly juggling my responsibilities while trying to meet the impossible expectations of my landlord. Eventually, I decided I couldn't do it anymore. The stress wasn't worth it. I moved to another suburb, and while the rent was more expensive, at least I finally had peace of mind. The new place gave me my own space, and the owner only came every 3 months to check on the property. No excessive rules, no unrealistic expectations, just a normal rental agreement, the way it should be. Looking back, my experience trying to find accommodation in Australia was exhausting, frustrating, and at times, completely unfair. Between overpriced rentals, racial discrimination in listings, and landlords who expect students to be their personal cleaners, it became clear to me that international students are often treated as second-class tenants. If you're planning to study in Australia, be prepared for the housing struggle. It's real, and it's something no one warns you about. Every year, thousands of international students choose Australia as their study destination, drawn by the promise of world-class education, job opportunities, and a better future. Universities, agents, and even the Australian government market it as an ideal place to study, work, and build a successful life. But behind the glossy advertisements and promising brochures lies a harsh reality, one that many students only discover when it's too late. Australia has become a trap for international students, exploiting them for money while offering little protection or support. From job scams and underpayment to skyrocketing rent, healthcare ripoffs, and impossible visa conditions, many students leave Australia feeling disappointed, broke, and even scammed. If you're considering studying in Australia, you need to hear the truth before making that decision. Let's start with one of the biggest issues: finding a job. For many international students, working part-time is not a luxury but a necessity. Tuition fees, rent, and everyday expenses are high, and without a job, it's nearly impossible to survive. However, what many don't realize is that finding legal and fairly paid work in Australia as an international student is incredibly difficult. Employers know that international students are desperate to work, and many take advantage of this situation. Some businesses openly pay students far below the legal minimum wage. While the law requires a minimum wage of around $25 per hour, many international students are forced to work for just $8 to $12 per hour, sometimes even less. This is illegal, but it's shockingly common, especially in industries like hospitality, cleaning, and retail. If you refuse a job because of the unfair wages, there are 10 other students willing to take it. This means you have little to no bargaining power. Then there are the so-called trial shifts. Many businesses advertise jobs, ask students to work for a few days as a trial, and then disappear without paying them. It's free labor for the employer and a complete waste of time and energy for the student. Complaining doesn't always help either. Many students fear losing their visas if they speak up, and even when they do, authorities rarely take action. Now, let's compare this to other countries. In Canada, for example, students have access to stronger labor protections, and minimum wages are strictly enforced. Employers who exploit workers face serious consequences. In Germany, student jobs are well regulated, and many are university affiliated, ensuring fair pay and legal working conditions. If your goal is to study while supporting yourself with a part-time job, Australia is not the best place to be. Another major issue international students face is the housing crisis. Australia's rent prices are among the highest in the world, and the demand for student accommodation is enormous. This creates the perfect opportunity for scammers to take advantage of desperate students. One of the most common scams involves fake rental listings. Students searching for affordable housing online often come across listings that seem too good to be true. Modern apartments in great locations for a reasonable price. Landlords or agents ask for deposits upfront, claiming there is a lot of interest in the property. Once the payment is made, the so-called landlord disappears, leaving the student without a home and no way to get their money back. Even when students do find housing, it's often overpriced and overcrowded. It's not uncommon for international students to live in shared apartments with 5, 10, or even more people, all paying individual rents that add up to far more than what the place is actually worth. Landlords know that students have limited options and use this to charge exorbitant prices for terrible living conditions. By comparison, countries like Germany and the Netherlands offer more student-friendly housing options, with universities often providing dormitories or affordable accommodations. Canada has government-supported housing initiatives that make finding a safe and fair-priced place to live much easier. If securing affordable housing is important to you, Australia is a risky choice. Health insurance is another area where international students get ripped off. In Australia, it is mandatory for international students to have Overseas Student Health Cover, or OSHC. On paper, this sounds like a good system. It ensures that students have access to healthcare while studying in the country. But in reality, it's an expensive scheme that benefits insurance companies more than the students it's supposed to protect. Many students report that their OSHC barely covers anything. Basic medical consultations, prescription medications, and specialist visits often come with out-of-pocket costs that can be shockingly high. Some students avoid seeing a doctor altogether because they simply cannot afford it. Dental and optical care are usually not covered at all, meaning if you need glasses or dental treatment, you're on your own. Compare this to countries like Canada, where government-backed health insurance is available to international students in several provinces, or Germany, where public health insurance covers most medical expenses for students at a reasonable cost. In these countries, healthcare is treated as a basic right, not as a business opportunity to exploit students. Visa conditions are another major trap for international students in Australia. The rules are strict, confusing, and sometimes completely unfair. International students can only work a limited number of hours per week, usually 24 hours during the semester. If you accidentally go over this limit, you risk losing your visa. Even more frustrating, if you fail a subject, change your course, or take too long to complete your studies, your visa status could be affected. Many students find themselves in situations where their visas are cancelled for minor reasons, leaving them in legal limbo with no clear options. And for those who hope to stay in Australia after graduation, the path to permanent residency is incredibly difficult and uncertain. In contrast, Canada has a clear post-study work program that allows international graduates to gain work experience and transition to permanent residency. Germany offers an 18-month post-study work visa with strong employment opportunities. Australia, on the other hand, takes your money, gives you a degree, and then makes it almost impossible for you to stay. Let's talk about tuition fees. Australian universities charge international students significantly higher fees than domestic students, often 3 to 4 times as much. But the hidden costs don't stop there. On top of tuition, students are hit with additional charges, fees for course materials, lab access, graduation ceremonies, even Wi-Fi access on campus. And despite paying so much, many international students report feeling like second-class students, receiving little academic support or career guidance. Now, let's look at the alternatives. In Germany and Norway, many universities offer free or low-cost education even to international students. In Canada, tuition fees for international students are high, but at least there are clear pathways to permanent residency and work opportunities that justify the investment. If you want to get the best value for your education, Australia might not be the smartest choice. So, is studying in Australia really worth it? Many students come here expecting a great experience, only to face financial struggles, exploitation, and an uncertain future. From job scams to unfair wages, overpriced housing, expensive healthcare, and impossible visa conditions, Australia does not provide the safe and supportive environment that international students deserve. If you're thinking about studying abroad, make sure you explore all your options. Countries like Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands offer stronger protections, fairer work conditions, and better opportunities after graduation. Before you make a decision, do your research, weigh the pros and cons, and don't fall for the Australian dream. Because for many international students, it's nothing but a costly illusion. What do you think? Have you or someone you know experienced these issues in Australia? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening content.